لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين أما بعد. My dear respected brothers, elders, sisters in Islam, we greet you with the greeting we hope to hear on the Day of Judgment. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I ask respectfully that you leave the back wall and you come forward and fill the lines, because the khutbah is part of the salah, and so as a result you would not need gaps in the salah, so you would not need gaps in the khutbah. It's not for me. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has gathered and guided us here up to this very auspicious moment, and that is the moment that we put our foreheads on the ground in sajda and submission to God and to God alone. I bear witness and testify, if it is my last act, that there is no one worthy of our worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no one worthy of our praise except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is none who gives us laws, rules, instructions except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there is none that will compare unto Him. I also bear witness and testify that about 1400 years ago, a man, a human being, named Muhammad ibn Abdullah, came to this earth and was blessed as the final prophet and messenger of Allah. That the book that he was given, the Holy Quran, is free of any distortion, any error, any departure from the truth. We say these things in English so that you understand them. We say them in Arabic so that you remember them also. When we say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, it is the constitution that defines the relationship of all men to God and therefore all men to each other. As to what follows, in some ways, to look at the events of this immediate week or the previous few weeks, one could say that it hasn't been a great time to be a human being. Several weeks ago, a soldier in Afghanistan, for reasons known at this point only to him, and perhaps when they come out later on in time, a man named Bales, I believe his name was Robert Bales, decided to leave his military base, and depending on whose version of events you believe, either alone or with others, perhaps intoxicated in Afghanistan, I wonder how, or perhaps not, decided to take it upon himself to shoot women, children, and old people, up to about 17 of them, most of whom it appears were completely unarmed, and the incident appears to have been completely in any way unprovoked. So a man who calls himself a soldier took it upon himself to murder 17 people who were not in any way engaged in any form of attack on him, who had no idea he was coming, who had no opportunity to defend themselves, and who were murdered in cold blood. A few weeks earlier, we came to light, exact date not sure, but in Florida, a man, Hispanic American apparently, saw a young African American boy. The boy was bringing his girlfriend's mother iced tea and Skittles, candy in a bag. And this man took it upon himself to view this young African American as a threat. And under a strange law in Florida called Stand Your Ground, he then took a 9mm automatic weapon, followed this boy, who was not armed, not any threat to him, and indeed on his way to deliver candy and iced tea, and he shot him in cold blood. And on the 911 tape, he calls it in, and what has compounded the matter is that apparently the local police did not see sufficient evidence that this assassination was worthy of a criminal charge. And so that was sort of a second low point for humanity in our definition of things. So on one we had a soldier who decided to appoint himself executioner. On the second we had a citizen who decided to appoint himself executioner. And just to prove that Muslims are not immune to this sort of self-appointing, in France recently, we had a man who used to walk around his apartment complex brandishing a sword, who decided that it was upon him to execute any French soldiers of North African or Muslim descent because he disagreed with their decision to serve in the French army. We can have a discussion about the merits of that some other time. But he decided that his initial method of administering justice in a court that was of his own choosing and rules that were known only to him was to drive up to people who were sitting on motorcycles, unarmed, unknowing of who he was, never met him, and pull out a weapon and a gun and shoot these people in the head. And then to compound matters, as part of his self-decided justice program, he decided to walk into a Jewish school and shoot school children, very young children, and apparently their old rabbi. And I don't remember all of the people that he shot by name. Unfortunately, I didn't get all of the names. But if it wasn't sufficient to execute his Muslim brothers and sisters, he then decided that it was upon him was the right to go ahead and execute school children. Children so young they weren't eligible for main school, and an unarmed rabbi who had taken it upon himself to educate these children in the faith and language of their fathers. So between these three collective acts of murder, one might say that it has not been a good day or a good bunch of weeks to be a human being. In many ways we say to ourselves, why is it that people take upon themselves the right that even God does not take for himself, which is the right to force people to look at the world the way they see it, the right to kill people who have not done anything wrong to them, whether it was Trayvon Martin, whether it was those innocent people in Afghanistan, whether it was those innocent people in France. None of the people that were killed had done anything to the people that killed them. They weren't known to the man that killed them. They had not committed any offense. They had not taken any property. They had not threatened or insulted his family. They didn't pull grass or flowers from his garden. They're just people, minding their own business, trying to live their life as best as they could, when somebody decided that he had the right to go shoot them because of some belief in the collectivization of people. Bales believes that everybody in Afghanistan was somehow deciding to kill everybody in America because some people who resided in Afghanistan had done so. At some point, Marat, I'm not sure if I'm saying his name properly, but Marat decided that anyone who serves in any way with the French army must be a war criminal, and that anyone who makes the mistake of attending a Hebrew school is worthy of being put to death. And we don't know exactly what was in George Zimmerman's mind, but we do know it's impossible to believe that Trayvon Martin would have been shot if he was white. And nobody's really saying it quite this way in the media because they wish to keep the emotions of people down. But if he was a white guy in a business suit, as opposed to a young black man, there is no way, in my mind, as I stand here before God and man, and ask any of you the same question, that A, he would have been shot in the first place and be perceived a threat, and B, to compound the matter, that the police would have seen a man being shot armed with Skittles as worthy of quote-unquote self-defense. I don't know if you've ever been hit by a Skittle, but you can get over it pretty quickly if it lands on your head. Not that there's any suggestion even that young Trayvon was even throwing a Skittle at this fellow. In fact, from the evidence that we have, it appears he was moving away from the man at the time that he was confronted. So we look to these examples and we say to ourselves, it's hard not as human beings to feel that we've reached sort of a low point in humanity when all around the world, in different parts of the world, from three completely different so-called civilizations, a common decision was reached that is disgusting to all of us who love and fear God, and all of us who have any respect at all for humanity. We ask ourselves how the world has reached a point where people have decided, because this is not sort of robbing someone for money, which has been around since time immemorial. This is not, shooting someone because they had said things about your wife. This is simply a quasi-political approach where one person decides that he has suddenly taken for himself the rights of entire groups of humanity. That he will be the one to decide what the value of another person's life is. And that he will be the one not only to decide that, but to implement his own self-governed ideas of how the world should work. Now, I mention this because increasingly it has become obvious to us, and you may wonder how I make this leap, what I was originally going to talk about and what I will still talk about. I believe these actions occur because there is a lack of leadership in people's minds. If people truly believe that the interest of whatever group they feel they are a part of, if people truly believe that they are represented by somebody, that they are protected by somebody, that they have a path to take whatever energy they have for their own good or the social good, people believe that that truly exists in the world, then I'm not going to say that these acts will never happen, but the frequency of them would happen less. If someone had actually taught Robert Bales a little bit about our part of the world, given him some understanding of our way of life, our real way of life, given him some perspective of our core humanity, it's hard to believe that he would believe that shooting women and children would accomplish anything of any good in his life, in the life of his country, or in the life of the world. If someone had pulled Muhammad Marah aside and given him an understanding of what Islam is really about and how it is spread and what Muslims need to do to restore both themselves and humanity to a level of greatness it has not seen, it's hard to believe that he would have come to the decision that the intelligent thing to do one morning was to grab a machine gun and shoot school children. But it's quite clear that whether we're talking about Bales, or whether we're talking about Marah, whether we're talking about 1,000 other people like them, that there's an enormous deficit of people of understanding who wish to communicate how the world really works, how the world's really built, how injustices are truly corrected. And rarely, if ever, are any of these things corrected by spectacular acts of violence that end in the massive loss of life. And rarely, if ever, does man solve his problems by taking away the one thing that gives him the ability to solve those problems, and that is his humanity. You see, man was given a position by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That position was recorded in Surah Al-Baqarah when it was announced to the angels that they should prostrate to man, should bow to man. Why? Because man was endowed with understanding. This understanding of the way the world works, which is symbolized by the verse, and tell them the names of things and the meanings of things. This understanding is what separated men from animals. It wasn't that men could do no wrong. In fact, they could. But man's greatness lies in his ability to both see what's wrong and see what's right, to look to the meaning of things, and to make decisions. When a man decides that his ability to see right from wrong, that his ability to think, that his love for his fellow man is no longer on the table, a man becomes nothing more than an animal who walks on 2 feet. And an animal is not superior to man. An animal is brought to a lower level than man. So when men decide to remove their humanity and act like animals, they take away the only thing that will ever solve their problems. The Quran tells us that its message will be understood by people who believe in things that they cannot see. This is a metaphor for many, many, many aspects of life. You see, if you let's take a simple example. If you bring a man outside a house, and you say to this man, this is your house. There's 10,000 pounds of furniture, books, clothing, food, appliances in this house. I want you to move 10,000 pounds of stuff in a day. According to the laws of physics, this is impossible. The physical boundary of man, this one man, does not give him the strength to move that kind of weight. Perhaps if he was physically an elephant, if he thinks like an animal, he could haul that weight. But what do most people do? Most people call their friends. If he's a Muslim, his brothers in Islam. The brother, I need to move. 20 people show up outside his house, and maybe their kids, and maybe their wives. And the wives start organizing what's inside the house, and the men start moving what's in the house.